Bible prophecy is active and unfolding daily. Zechariah 12, Isaiah 17, Psalm 83, Ezekiel 38. Here is what the LameStream Media is not telling you. Shalom, my friends. Welcome to this week's newscast. From the Wall Street Journal, the White House is working on plans for reviving Middle East negotiations before President Obama leaves office, including a possible UN Security Council resolution that would outline steps toward a deal between the Israelis and Palestinians, according to senior U.S. officials. Mounting a push for a Security Council resolution would be a significant shift in U.S. policy, one that would further strain relations between Obama and Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu. Relations that are strained well enough already. From the Jewish Telegraphic Agency, Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas turned down a U.S. peace initiative presented to him during a meeting with Vice President Joe Biden on Wednesday, March 9th, in Ramallah. The new American initiative to restart peace talks included designating Eastern Jerusalem as the capital of the future Palestinian state, halting settlement construction in the West Bank and Eastern Jerusalem, Palestinian recognition of Israel as a Jewish state, and giving up the demand for a Palestinian right of return. This all brings us to the book of Yoel, that's Joel, chapter 3, verse 2, where we read, "I will gather together all the Gentile nations that were hostile to my people," Elohim speaking, "and bring them down into the valley of Jehoshaphat." Now, a lot of people always try and determine, where is this valley? And it's not necessarily a valley that's named Jehoshaphat. I'll clarify that in a moment. Continuing, it reads, "And there I will deal with them and enter into judgment with them there for the treatment of my people, my inheritance, Israel, whom they have scattered among the nations, and because they have encroached on my land and divided it up." You don't want to mess with the land, Israel. It belongs to Abba Father Yahweh. Anybody messes with it, he'll nail them. Now, this valley of Jehoshaphat, a lot of times you see Jehoshaphat, but the letter J didn't come into the world until the 1600s. The proper name is Yahshua. Now, the valley of Jehoshaphat would simply be regarded as a general term for the theater of Elohim's final judgments on the enemies of Israel. Jehoshaphat means the judgment of Yahweh. Yah, short for Yahweh. Oshaphat, the judgment of. Jehoshaphat means the judgment of Yahweh. We can read Joel chapter 3, verse 2 as saying, "I will gather together all the Gentile nations that were hostile to my people, Israel, and bring them down into the valley of the judgment of Yah." And for two reasons. One, for their treatment of Israel, more specifically their mistreatment of Yahweh's people, Israel. And number two, for dividing Yahweh's land. This is what they want to do. And he is going to squash them like little bugs for doing it. From the Washington Times, it seems President Obama has got his sights set on the world stage, this time as Secretary General of the United Nations, according to Kuwaiti newspaper Al Jazeera, who has also reported that Obama has already discussed the issue with Republican, Democratic, and Jewish officials in the United States. I don't know. What's he thinking? Does he want to be the one world government leader? That's what I think. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu reportedly is planning payback for President Obama's dismissing him and his objections to the Iran nuclear deal last year, rallying moderate Arabs to thwart Obama's bid to become the Secretary General of the UN after he leaves the White House next year. Netanyahu is calling it the Obama Project. Quote, "Wasn't 8 years of having Obama in office enough? 8 years during which he ignored Israel? And now he wants to be in a position that is liable to cause us hardships in the international arena." Close quote. Now, a good number of you, my friends, have been asking me what I think about Nibiru, Planet X, or according to Gil Broussard, Planet 7X. So I looked into it, and first I have to say that Gil Broussard's information, especially concerning Planet 7X and its relation to biblical events like Enoch being taken up, the Great Flood, Sodom and Gomorrah, the Tower of Babel, the Exodus, Joshua's long day, Hezekiah's sundial, and more, all appears to be very exciting and very convincing. However, the problem I always have with anyone who presents dates for things to happen is that I have found they always have one thing in common, and that is that they are all always wrong. Mr. Broussard said that Nibiru, or Planet X, should be visible sometime after September last year, but nothing's been seen. Of course, there are gaggles of people out there with pictures they took using their phones. Is this Nibiru? But they're only capturing refracted light or sundogs, not Planet X. Broussard is also saying that we're already in the tribulation, that Osama bin Laden was the rider on the white horse, the first seal of Revelation chapter 6. The second seal was the beginning of global terrorism. The third seal is a global financial collapse, which was supposed to have happened last month and the month before. The fourth seal, a breakout of pandemic infection, which was supposed to have already happened. The fifth seal was supposed to have occurred this past January and February with a 7-year peace treaty. And now, March 26th is supposed to be the beginning of the sixth seal seen in the book of Revelation, with the first meteor storm from Nibiru, Planet X, slamming 1/3 of the Earth's surface, that is North and South America, and that is in less than 2 weeks. Further, August and September later this year should bring the seventh seal and the second meteor storm. And by the way, Pesach, Passover, coming up on April 22nd, supposed to begin the event of the 2 witnesses on the streets of Jerusalem seen in Revelation chapter 11. All of that was enough to make me walk away, my friends. But the worst of everything he had to say is that the rapture, that is the net chetef in Aramaic, happens at the end of the Great Tribulation. Now, I'm sorry, but I just ain't buying anything Broussard at all. Anyone who thinks they can see the Nechetef, the rapture, happening after the seventh trumpet in Revelation just loses all credibility with me. People who see the rapture happening during or after the tribulation are always people who don't know the word in its entirety. Whatever they think they're reading must have happened when all the lights went out. Further, there are those who claim that the U.S. government built the South Pole telescope to track Nibiru's trajectory and that the object has been imaged out optically. But, you know, the South Pole telescope, which is not funded by NASA, is a radio telescope and cannot take optical images. Its South Pole location was chosen due to the low humidity environment, and there's no way an approaching object could be seen only from the South Pole. The picture of Nibiru posted on YouTube was revealed, in fact, to be a Hubble image of the expanding light echo around a star. And then there's the claim regarding a patch of missing data in Google sky near the constellation of Orion, which has often been cited as evidence that Nibiru has been redacted. But the same region of sky can still be viewed by thousands of amateur astronomers, and a scientist at Google said that the missing data is due to a glitch in the stitching software used to piece the images together. My advice, stay away from these rabbits and their enticements to get you running down their rabbit holes, my friends. Keep your focus on pitching your tent with Elohim and nothing else. Now, last Thursday, I covered the topic of Easter. As always, you'll see this graphic at the end of today's newscast, as well as a text link in the More Info section beneath today's newscast. You can click, and if you haven't seen last Thursday's video, I encourage you to watch it now. Easter is only 12 days away, and you really need to fully understand what you've been doing all these years by esteeming this horrible holiday with all of its satanic elements and filling the minds of your precious children with images that are absolute abominations to Elohim. And since Easter is supposed to be about the resurrection of our Kodesh Mashiach, our Messiah, Yahshua, in the final 15 minutes or so of the video, we study John chapter 20. You won't want to miss that. Turning to wars and rumors of wars, from ARA News, the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, OHCHR, announced that the number of people attacked with mustard gas in Taza Kermatu, south of Kirkuk province in northern Iraq, have exceeded 400 people after ISIS hit the area with missiles carrying chemical substances on the town. The human rights official pointed out that the injuries varied from one person to another as burns appeared on different parts of their bodies with sudden tumors and skin bubbles on their faces. The affected people suffered burning in their noses and throats as well. Quote, many cases of red eyes, dry lips, fainting, vomiting, and difficulty in breathing were seen in the attacked area. Close quote. Warning, of constant growing in the number of injuries. Also, the governor of Kirkuk, Najim al-Din Karim, has revealed Wednesday that ISIS extremists attacked the village of Taza, south of Kirkuk, on Tuesday night with rocket-propelled rockets that contained toxic substances, pointing out around 40 people suffered suffocation from inhaling the gas of the rockets that hit their area. ISIS chemical attacks coincide with heavy airstrikes by the U.S.-led coalition on the group's strongholds in Iraq, amid continuous ground operations by the Kurdish Peshmerga forces and Iraqi army troops in a bid to regain Mosul, ISIS's main bastion in northern Iraq. On Tuesday, March 8th, from ARA News, Kurdish region, Abu Ali al-Tunisi, a Tunisian jihadi and commander of ISIS military operations in northern Raqqa, was killed in the hands of fellow ISIS militants. And more than 200 militants have deserted the ranks of ISIS in Syria's Raqqa province over the past week. Most of the dissidents headed to Aleppo to join the ranks of Syrian rebel groups. And on Wednesday, March 9th, from the Associated Press, Iran reportedly test-fired 2 ballistic missiles with the phrase, "Israel must be wiped out," written on them, a show of force by the Islamic Republic as U.S. Vice President Joe Biden visited Israel. Such phrases have been emblazoned on missiles fired before by Iran, but this test comes as the country recently signed a nuclear deal with world powers. On Friday, March 11th, from the Middle East Eye, rockets fired from the Gaza Strip by Palestinian militants hit southern Israel on Friday night. From Hawar News, Democratic Syria forces liberated 65% of the village of El Mekhmen, that is ISIS's last military base in a region near the city of Raqqa. From NDTV, Lebanese army troops clashed with terrorists in the country's northeast near the Syrian border, leaving one soldier and 8 gunmen dead. It was unclear which group the terrorists were fighting for. Then on Saturday, March 12th, from the Middle East Eye, Israeli warplanes struck the Gaza Strip early on Saturday, killing a 10-year-old boy and his 6-year-old sister. That was one of 4 strikes the Israeli military carried out in response to rockets fired into Israel on Friday night. Turning to our Intifada update. On Tuesday, March 8th, from Ynet News, a Palestinian woman tried to stab Israeli police officers in Jerusalem's Old City before being shot and killed. From the Jerusalem Post, 26-year-old Yishay Montgomery, a street performer on the Tel Aviv Jaffa Promenade, saw a Palestinian terrorist running toward him on Tuesday and stopped the terrorist dead in his tracks. Quote, he said, "I hit him with the guitar because it's what I had." Close quote. Later, he was given a brand new guitar by the HalleluYah music store to reward his heroism. How cool is that one? From the Times of Israel, 2 Israeli border police officers were seriously injured in a drive-by shooting attack near Jerusalem's Damascus Gate. The gunman opened fire at the officers, striking one in the head. Security forces engaged him in a firefight, during which he shot a second officer before he was shot dead. Further, a Palestinian assailant followed an Israeli man into a shop and began stabbing him. At one point, the victim regained composure and turned the knife on the stabber. Police confirmed that the attacker was killed when he was stabbed with his own knife. The Israeli victim, around 40 years old, suffered multiple stab wounds. From the Washington Post, less than a mile from where U.S. Vice President Joe Biden spoke at the Perez Center for Peace in Jaffa, a Palestinian attacker went on a stabbing rampage that left an American tourist dead. 28-year-old Taylor Force from Texas. Also, 11 others were wounded before the assailant was fatally shot by police. At least 14 Israelis were wounded in terror attacks on Tuesday. Among the wounded were 4 American tourists, including the critically injured wife of Taylor Force, who was murdered. On Wednesday, March 9th, from the Jerusalem Post and Ynet News, 2 Palestinian terrorists carried out 2 separate shooting attacks in Jerusalem before being shot by security forces. In the Jerusalem neighborhood of Ramot, 2 men in a car were seen firing shots at a public bus. A citizen exited his car, ran towards the scene, and fired his weapon. The terrorists fled. Then an additional shooting attack was reported near the Damascus Gate in Jerusalem's Old City, where a Palestinian was shot and wounded while driving his car. The 2 terrorists were killed by security forces. Police found weapons inside their vehicle and suspect the same vehicle was used in both attacks. From Israel Hayom, a knife-wielding female Palestinian terrorist was apprehended on Wednesday after having snuck into the community of Kedumim in the West Bank with the intention of carrying out a stabbing attack. The terrorist, who was arrested in the yard of a home, was spotted by security cameras. IDF troops and local security officers rushed to the scene. Then on Friday, March 11th, from Haaretz, a 29-year-old Israeli man was stabbed in the Muslim quarter of Jerusalem's Old City. The 19-year-old assailant from the West Bank was detained. Then 2 Israeli soldiers were wounded in a shooting attack on Friday night at a checkpoint in the West Bank by a gunman who opened fire from a vehicle before fleeing the scene. On Monday, March 14th, from Haaretz, 3 Israeli soldiers were wounded in shooting and car ramming attacks on Monday morning near Kiryat Arba in the West Bank. In the first attack, a car entered Kiryat Arba and stopped at a bus station where 2 armed assailants stepped out of the vehicle and opened fire, wounding a soldier before they were shot dead. Then, just minutes later, 2 Israeli soldiers were wounded after a Palestinian rammed his car into a bus. He was killed by soldiers at the scene. Turning to our review of last week's news, talks about creating peace and security and the dividing of Israel are escalating. Obama has his sights set on the UN after he leaves office in the U.S. ISIS has been resorting to chemical warfare. Commander of ISIS military operations in northern Raqqa was killed at the hands of fellow ISIS militants. Everyone's up in arms about Iran's test firing of 2 ballistic missiles with the phrase, "Israel must be wiped out," written on them. Rockets were fired from the Gaza Strip by Palestinian militants hitting southern Israel. Israeli warplanes struck the Gaza Strip in retaliation for the rockets fired the previous night. Democratic Syria forces liberated 65% of ISIS's last military base near the city of Raqqa. Lebanese army troops clashed with terrorists in the country's northeast near the Syrian border. There were 4 stabbing attacks, 1 stabbing rampage, killing an American tourist and wounding at least 11 others, including the American tourist's wife. 5 drive-by shooting attacks, and 2 car ramming attacks. And that, my friends, is what the LameStream Media is not telling you. Abba willing, I'll see you here again next week. Until then, stay safe. Shalom.
Crowded rooms, I need more space than I consume. Enough is time alone with you, underneath the naked moon, sharing confidential moods and making chatter. Mockingbird nocturnal sings notations of eternal things, entering the quantum breeze, flying not for want of wings. He lights his gaze on you and me, simply because we matter.